Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 72 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at halfandhalf_TPL. I'm here today for a Week 3 preview. We're going to preview every game from the Week 3 slate. I'm going to give you my picks, my predictions, the biggest storylines that you need to be aware of. Now, again, if you're new to the show, you're not familiar with our format. Every Tuesday night, I'm going to be going live with Mark Henry Jr., my co-host, and we'll do a full NFL review. Those shows are around an hour and 15 to an hour and 30 minutes. Our preview shows is just me solo. They come to you on Thursday or Friday during the day, and they're shorter, 30 to 40 minutes, just to kind of give you some of the high points. So week 1, I went 7-8 with my picks. Week 2, I went 8-8. Obviously, we had the tie that was the push in week 1. So I've increased my win total by 1. We'll see if we can continue that. So my goal is to get 9 games right this week. And hey, if we just keep building one each week, eventually I'll get 16-0. So we'll see what happens. But as we always do, I'm going to start off with the Eagles game. I'm going to go a little more in depth with the Eagles preview. And then I'll throw it around the NFL, starting with tonight's game, Thursday night, Pittsburgh at Cleveland, and then working through the rest of the slate. So without any further ado, let's dive into the Eagles matchup with the Washington Commanders at FedEx Field in Maryland. The Eagles enter this game 2-0. The Commanders, they keep changing their name. It's so hard. The football team, the Commanders, they are 1-1 after a loss to Detroit in week 1 or in week 2, a loss, by the way, that they deserved. They made fun of the Eagles for allowing 35 points in a win on Twitter, and then they allowed 36 in a loss. So maybe karma does exist out there. But this is the Carson Wentz revenge game. Carson Wentz facing the Philadelphia Eagles for the first time since the trade. A lot of things to get into with this game. But let's start out looking at Eagles offense and football team, Commanders defense. I'm going to do that all podcasts. Commanders, Redskins, football team, whatever. So the Commanders have a stout defensive front. They've invested a lot into the trenches, and even though Chase Young has been injured, he hasn't looked like himself when he has played after that strong rookie campaign. They have a very good defensive front. The problem is at their second level with linebackers. They have Cole Holcomb, who is he's fine in coverage. He's a fine linebacker, but he's not a great linebacker. And then they spent a first-round pick on Jamin Davis last year, who was a very athletic linebacker from a small school, and he struggled as a rookie, and he continues to struggle in his second year with the team. And so there's a weak linebacker core here, and I think that's something the Eagles could and should look to exploit in this game. When you think about running the football, there's going to be runs that Daron Payne just stuffs Miles Sanders for a 2-yard loss. There's going to be runs where they play Jalen Hurts perfectly and the Eagles aren't able to gain yardage. But if you continue to run the ball, all of a sudden you're going to find yourself past Daron Payne with 10 yards of open space. I just don't think that this run defense is very good. That's something the numbers bear out, by the way. And so I think the Eagles should plan to exploit that. They should plan a run-heavy approach in this game. Of course, I said that last week, and they came out throwing against the Vikings, and it worked really well too. So, of course, they're not just precluded to running the ball. They can also throw, particularly over the middle of the field where those linebackers are. Again, Jamin Davis, Cole Holcomb, not great pieces there. Pieces the Eagles should certainly want to target, whether it be in the RPO game, forcing them to make quick reads, whether it be more of a traditional drop back or play action offense to open up those holes. This should be, matchup wise, this should be a big Dallas Goedert game. I don't think the Commanders have anyone that can cover Dallas Goedert. And so I would expect a big game for Goedert, especially operating over the middle of the field, maybe those intermediate outbreaker routes, those flood concepts that the Eagles like to run. The Eagles have a good offense this year, and the Commanders, they just don't have that great of a defense. The front is fine. They will get some pressure. They will be able to stuff some runs, but ultimately outside of the defensive line, it's just not there, both in the secondary and at linebacker. And so I expect the Eagles offense to put up some numbers in this game. And so we flip to the other aspect, which is the Commanders offense against the Eagles defense. The Commanders have a lot of playmakers. They have Terry McLaurin. They've got Antonio Gibson, who they got really involved in week one, and he just didn't see much action in week two. He had 7 receptions in week one for 79 yards. He only had 2 receptions in week two. They've got more receiving options than Carson Wentz has ever had to work with, either at his time in Philadelphia or his time in Indianapolis. So the points will be there. The opportunities will be there for the Commanders. Whereas the Vikings had a clear number one passing threat in Justin Jefferson. The Commanders don't necessarily have that. Terry McLaurin didn't have the greatest game last week, but the Commanders were still able to push the ball downfield to different targets. And so for the Eagles, I think as you approach this, there's one of 2 ways that you can approach this offense. One would be to say that Carson Wentz is a player that I don't think can execute methodical drives down the field. And so you play the soft coverage, the 2 high shells, you rush 4, you drop 7, you rush 3, you drop 8, and you make him execute 12-play drives. That's something he's had problems with in the past. Maybe that works, maybe it doesn't. The other approach would be to just bring pressure. Go man coverage, bring 5, 6-man pressures, do simulated pressures to try to rattle Wentz, because when Wentz is under pressure, he's been atrocious this year. And really, throughout his career, with the exception of 2017, when under pressure, Wentz has not been a good football player. And so there's sort of 2 approaches. There's a fork in the road. You can either approach this game with the idea that you're going to force Carson Wentz, force the issue, and force him to make mistakes, or you can sit back and let those mistakes come to you. If the Eagles decide to go aggressive, it's going to be a big game for Avonte Maddox, a big game for James Bradbury, who have looked good so far this year, but they will be facing some of the best receiving options that they've faced this year. In the Commanders, number 2, number 3 receivers, Jahan Dotson has been off to a strong start of the year. So it's not just Darius Slay doing his part. Everybody has to win those reps. And so you're playing with fire there. I don't think it's a bad idea to get out and pressure Wentz. I also don't think it's a bad idea to sit back and make him dink and dunk those drives and see if he's willing to do it. I think those are both logical approaches, and the Eagles can just flip a coin and decide which one they want to start with. And if it doesn't work, they can always pivot, although that has not been Jonathan Gannon's strength thus far. For me, I would try to bring pressure early. Especially Chase Rouillet, the center for the Commanders, is out. The right guard might be out as well. And so you're facing a weak interior line. I would like to see those 5-man fronts, bring TJ Edwards on some pressures, and just try to make Wentz as uncomfortable as possible early in this game. Weird things happen in Washington games for the Eagles. It's been close games throughout the years, even when it maybe should have not been. But ultimately, last year, the Eagles against Washington, who brought a lot of pressure, they were able to move the ball. They were able to run a lot. Miles Sanders' last 100-yard game came in his last matchup with Washington, and I expect that to be more of the pattern. So I think this could be a high-scoring game, but I will take the Eagles to win a high-scoring game on Sunday at FedEx Field. So now let's move on to the Thursday night game. Tonight we have Pittsburgh traveling to Cleveland to take on the Browns. Surprisingly this season, the Cleveland offense hasn't been the problem. Jacoby Brissett's been fine. The running game has been good. It's the defense that's been the problem. The Cleveland defense that was expected to try to carry this team until Deshaun Watson came back, they have been the ones that have let everyone down. They're facing this week a potential get-right opponent in the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have one of the worst offenses in the entire NFL. So this is a battle of Mitch Trubisky and a bad offense on the road versus the defense that just blew a 13-point lead in 90 seconds to Joe Flacco. Riveting football, must watch on Thursday night. There's a lot of guys missing from this game. TJ Watt, Jadeveon Clowney are both out. Myles Garrett is questionable for this game. It's expected that he might miss, and that would be huge. It would maybe give the offense for the Steelers a little bit of a chance. At the end of the day, though, I just have more faith in the Browns offense with Brissett than I do the Steelers, who are still refusing to play Kenny Pickett. I think a bad game tonight for Mitch Trubisky might be the best thing for the Steelers, because I think it forces their hand to go to Kenny Pickett. You would have kind of the mini bye. You've got the 3 extra days rest, And so, and obviously, if I'm a Steelers fan, I'm not rooting to lose. I'd love to win, but I would love for it to be clear that Mitch Trubisky had another bad game. The defense won you the game. And I would love to see the Steelers go to Kenny Pickett for week 4. Let's roll on to the next game. The New Orleans Saints traveling to Carolina to play the Panthers. The Saints offense is bad. They're just flat out bad. And it starts with Jameis Winston. Their receivers look good. Chris Olave looks to be the part. Michael Thomas is back. He looks like himself. Even Jarvis Landry has been decent this year, but Jameis Winston is just bad. He's a bad quarterback. And this week he's on the injury report with back and ankle injuries after a game against the Bucs in which he was sacked 6 times and he threw 3 interceptions. So the Saints offense is bad. Let's talk about the Panthers offense. The Panthers are 1-25 under coach Matt Rule when they allow 17 or more points. If you get 17 points on the Panthers, they're not going to win because their offense is so bad. Now, I think you could hold the Saints under 17. I think you can hold the Panthers under 17. These are 2 really bad offenses. And when it boils down to it, though, one of them has a good defense. And so I'm going to take the Saints in this one. And honestly, I don't even think it matters if Jameis plays. If you put Taysom Hill back there, I still think the Saints can win this game on the strength of their defense against what is a very bad Carolina offense. So I think Carolina drops this game. They go to 0-3, and New Orleans will pick up their second win of the season. Next, we have the Houston Texans traveling to the Windy City to take on the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears have attempted 28 passes in 2 games. 2 games, 28, that's 14 passes a game for your franchise quarterback you're trying to develop in Justin Fields. That is half the next closest team. The Bears have thrown the ball as much in 2 games as the next closest team to them has thrown it in 1 game. Just think about that. I have more faith in the Texans than I do the Bears at this point. And yes, the Bears, the new regime, was put into a difficult situation. The sooner they accept that and that they're not competing this year and they start to build for the future, they already think that, right? They didn't sign any contracts in free agency. They've kicked cans down the road. They built some defense. Just accept that you're not going to compete this year and try to get an honest evaluation of Justin Fields. And you can't do that with him throwing 14 passes a game. I've got more faith in the Texans than I do the Bears. Their defense is okay. Their offense isn't, but their defense is okay. And I think that's more than you can say for the Bears right now. So I think this is going to be a low-scoring game. I don't expect a lot out of either of these teams, but I do think Houston will come out on top in this one with the win. Up next, we have the Chiefs at the Colts. The Chiefs are only favored by 6.5 in this game, and for the life of me, I cannot figure out why. I mean, one team is 2-0 with one of the best coaches of all time, one of the best quarterbacks of all time, and 3 days of extra rest. The other team is winless with no left tackle, no wide receivers, and a minus 41 point differential in the first 3 quarters so far this year. I really don't see how this game is even close. Yes, it's in Indianapolis. I just don't see it. I think Frank Clark and George Karlaftis, and I think they're going to eat the Colts offensive line alive, and Matt Ryan doesn't have mobility to escape. He doesn't have playmakers to throw to. I just don't see this game honestly being even competitive. I think Kansas City wins this one in a blowout. If you're looking for a survivor pick, I think this is a great survivor pick for your survivor pools this week. Up next is Buffalo at Miami. This is the game of the week for me. It is between 2 top 6 teams in my power rankings. I have the Bills at 1. I have the Dolphins jumping up to 6 after last week's win. The Bills are on the road on a short week after playing on Monday Night Football, so there's an advantage for Miami there. But do you really expect the Bills not to be ready for a game like this, much less a divisional game? The AFC East is on the line. And I know it's just week 3, but these 2 teams are both expected to make the playoffs. They would both love to push for a 1 seed and a bye. And you got to win the division to do that. I think the Bills are going to be ready. They won in a blowout, and so it's not like they had pedal to the metal for 4 quarters on Monday night. Meanwhile, it took everything that the Dolphins had to come back against the Ravens on Sunday. One of the greatest comebacks that I've ever seen. And that takes something out of you. We look at this matchup and it doesn't feel like anybody can stop the Bills, much less a defense that gave up 35 points to the Ravens, who really don't have any receivers. Last week was a big step for Tua, but he's facing an even more difficult test this week in the Bills defense. I just don't think the Dolphins can get this done. And I think the Dolphins are a good football team. I think they've proven that through the first 2 weeks. I just don't think that they're going to be able to take down the Bills. The Bills appear to be on another level. They're on a mission. And I fully trust Josh Allen and the offense. I don't fully trust Tua. I think Tua can make some mistakes. And you throw 2 interceptions in the first quarter like you did against the Ravens, the Bills aren't letting you back in that game. And so I'm going to take the Bills in this one. I do think it's going to be a really good game, though, on the road in Miami. Moving on to Detroit at Minnesota. Detroit has the blueprint to beat Minnesota. Kirk Cousins was 4 of 12 against the blitz and 2 of 12 against man coverage last week. Guess who blitzes and plays man behind it a ton? That's right, the Detroit Lions. And besides it being a terrible matchup there, the Minnesota Vikings are coming off of a short week. They played on Monday Night Football. Now, I'm not saying this is a slam dunk for Detroit. This is the Lions' first road game. I don't think Minnesota's that bad. They took care of Green Bay in week 1. I think they can rebound here, but Kirk Cousins is going to have to do a better job against the Lions than he did the Eagles. And yes, the Eagles are a more talented team. You know, the Eagles have Darius Slay and the Lions don't. They have Jeffrey Okudah, who's looked better through 2 weeks. They don't have Darius Slay to take away Justin Jefferson. And so if the Lions blitz, if they bring man pressure, it's going to be up to Kirk. Now, I don't want to be in a situation where I'm relying on Kirk Cousins, where I'm betting on Kirk Cousins, but I trust him more than Jared Goff. I think the Vikings will rebound in this game. I'm going to take them to win at home and get back to 2-1. Up next, we have Baltimore at New England. Last year, the Ravens struggled against the blitz. A week ago, Lamar was lights out versus the blitz in Miami. He played really well. He almost forced them to stop blitzing. It's a heartbreaker for the Ravens what happened to them last week, but it was such an encouraging performance for Lamar. New England, they just haven't looked very good so far. And they played a defense last week, a good defense in the Steelers, although TJ Watt was out, and they were able to eke out a win 17-14. And I think their offense played a little better than that. There were some encouraging signs from the offense. The question is, can they build on it against a defense that just collapsed? Now, the Patriots don't have Tua, who I would probably prefer to Mac Jones. They don't have nearly the weapons that the Dolphins do. I don't think that their running game, their power running game that they brought out against the Steelers, I don't know that that'll work as well against the Ravens. I'm going to take the Ravens in this one. And I realize I'm picking a lot of road teams here, but I think Baltimore, after what happened to them last week, I think they're going to come out ready to prove something. And I think they're able to take down the Patriots. Up next, we have a team with a lot to prove, the Cincinnati Bengals, as they travel to New York to face the Jets. Now, the Bengals have been all out of sorts this year. They're 0-2. Joe Burrow's been sacked like 13 times through the first 2 games. Meanwhile, the Jets are coming off of a crazy come-from-behind win where they overcame a 13-point deficit in the final 90 seconds, and they're playing at home in front of their fans. And the players have to believe, like, when you go down 2 touchdowns with 90 seconds left and you come back to win, you never believe that you're out of a game again. The Jets are not going to roll over. They're not going to believe that they are out of this game going into it or at any point during the game. I'm still taking the Bengals, though. It's too good of a team to lose to the Jets and fall to 0-3. At some point, the talent has to shine through, and the Bengals did upgrade that offensive line, and it hasn't meshed yet, but that chemistry is a big thing. Zach Taylor's not adjusting the way that he needs to, but Joe Burrow knows what he wants. We saw him yelling at Taylor on the field, "No more empty." Joe Burrow is going to have a lot more input in this game plan this week, than he did in the middle of the game last week. And so I just think the Bengals, they have the talent. They're going to out-talent the Jets, and I think they're going to get their first win of the season, something that fans can feel good about. So give me the Jets losing at home against the Bengals. Up next, our last game of the 1 p.m. slate is the Las Vegas Raiders traveling to Tennessee to take on the Titans in a battle of 0-2 teams. So you've heard of the 0-2, the 0 tombstone, where teams that start 0-2, just a small percentage make the playoffs, and of course that drops even more at 0-3. And one of these teams, Tennessee, the number 1 seed in the AFC last year, the Raiders, who made the big splash for Davante Adams and has playoff aspirations in a loaded AFC West. One of them is going to be 0-3 after this week. I guess unless they tie, then they could both be 0-2-1. But one of these teams will be 0-3, and playoffs will just be a very, very small glimmer of hope on the horizon. How will Josh McDaniels handle his team at 0-2 with a frustrated wide receiver? Davante Adams left the locker room without speaking to reporters after last week's game, where he only had 2 receptions after being targeted a lot in week 1. The Raiders are a much more talented team, in my opinion. You got Hunter Renfrow, you've got Davante Adams, you have Josh Jacobs, you have somebody else I'm forgetting. Whatever. The Raiders are a more talented team. I think the Titans have a much better coach in Mike Vrabel. And so, you pick and choose. Do you want the talent? Do you want the better coach? I'm going to take the talent in this situation. I'll take the Raiders. Again, this is another one where I'm picking the road team in a close decision, but I think Derek Carr and Davante Adams are going to get back on the same page. Darren Waller, that's the name that I was stumbling with. Darren Waller is going to get involved. Hunter Renfrow, 2 fumbles in overtime. He's going to be looking to redeem himself, and I think the Raiders are able to pick up a win against a Titan team that look totally lost through the first 2 weeks of the season. Now into the afternoon slate, we have a really interesting one here, with the Jacksonville Jaguars traveling across the country to take on the Chargers. The storyline in this game is, will Justin Herbert play? He has fractures in his rib cartilage after the Thursday night game, and that's going to be a long process to come back from. He's going to be playing sub 100%. The game boils down to, will he play? And if he can play, and if he's effective playing, can the Jags even hang with the Chargers? I don't think so. The Chargers are just a very good football team, but it all boils down to Herbert. If Herbert can't play, if he's struggling, or if he's out due to an injury, the Jags could pull off an upset. The Jags are an interesting team this year. So I'm going to ride with Herbert for now, but I will change that in a heartbeat if I hear that Herbert is out, if he doesn't come into this game and play. Now, I expect Herbert to play. I expect him to play through the injury. We saw the post he threw on 4th and 13 or whatever against the Chiefs. That was after the injury. Yeah, I mean, there was some adrenaline flowing there, but I think that they're gonna get Herbert out there and hopefully keep him upright against the Jags pass rush. Josh Allen, Travon Walker have been wrecking havoc in backfields, and I think the Chargers will walk out of this one with a win. Moving on, we have the Rams, the LA Rams traveling to Arizona to take on the Cardinals. Both teams coming off of wins. The Cardinals had a crazy comeback against the Raiders, where they were terrible for 3 quarters and then came back. The Rams just survived a crazy comeback bid by the Falcons, blowing a 28-3 lead and then surviving with an interception in the end zone to seal the game. Arizona is going to go as far as Kyler takes them. I think the offensive structure that Cliff Kingsbury has is atrocious. I think their defense isn't very good. They're going to go as far as Kyler takes them, and that's what happened last week. Kyler took over that game, and he got the Cardinals a win. I just don't think that's going to work against the Rams. Now, the Rams haven't been a great team this year. They're not the team that they've been in the past. They're working through some things offensively. They're really struggling to run the football. And so I don't think that they can get by. Right? I think the Rams can get by in this game. It buys them another week to try to figure things out. You would much rather be trying to figure things out at 2-1 than you would at 1-2. So give me the Rams give me the Rams going on the road in Arizona and winning this game. Moving on, we have the Atlanta Falcons traveling to Seattle to take on the Seahawks. The Seahawks, who honestly, they're just a bad football team. Yeah, they're 1-1. they were obliterated by the 49ers in week 2. The 49ers, who had to make a schematic change going to Jimmy Garoppolo after the Trey Lance injury. Week 1, they survived the red zones, or the Broncos' red zone ineptitude. They're able to get a win there. I just don't think that Seattle is going to be able to win many games this year, which honestly is probably good. They need to go get a quarterback. Geno Smith, it's fun to watch him play, get a shot. Ultimately, he's going to have to be more aggressive and push the ball downfield. His stat lines, he's just too risk averse. There's a line with a quarterback where you want a guy that's not too risky, but you can't be too risk averse. And Geno certainly falls on the risk averse side of what is allowable for an NFL starting quarterback. The Falcons, on the flip side, they're the Falcons. They blew their week 1 game against the Saints, a game they should have had locked down. And then they almost had the huge comeback last week before they throw the interception in the end zone. I think the Falcons do enough to squeak by this time. They get their first win of the year. They go to 1-2. Their college-y style pistol offense with Marcus Mariota. It's fun to watch. I think they're going to be able to squeak by the Seahawks and pick up their first win of the year. Up next, we have another game of the week. This is the Green Bay Packers at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is another top 10 matchup in my power rankings. But unfortunately, both teams are not going to be at full strength. Mike Evans is suspended for this game following his fight with Marshawn Lattimore last week. But it's not just Mike Evans. Chris Godwin and Julio Jones may also miss this game for the Bucs, which leaves the question, who is Tom Brady throwing the football to? The Bucs could also be on their third string left tackle, so a lot of injuries for the Bucs. That said, the Bucs defense has been stellar. 13 points allowed in 2 games, a game against the Cowboys, who were one of the top offenses last year, and then a game, admittedly, against the Saints, but they made Jameis Winston look truly awful in that game. On the flip side, you have the Packers. The Packers were embarrassed by the Vikings in week 1, and then they got their run game going against the Bears. But the problem is you're not going to run on the Bucs like that, and I still haven't seen Aaron Rodgers finding chemistry with his new receivers. And so I think the Bucs win this game. I think it's going to be an ugly game. You might get Tom Brady throwing the tablet on the sideline again. Maybe he should just do that in the first quarter. The offense got a lot better after that. If you're a superstitious person, maybe you get Tom Brady to throw that tablet early. But I think the Bucs will win an ugly game, and the Green Bay Packers are going to fall to 1-2 on the year. Moving on to Sunday Night Football, we have the San Francisco 49ers at the Denver Broncos. This is Nate Hackett watch. After Nathaniel Hackett has had some very notable botched clock management and things like in-game decision-making through the first 2 weeks, now he's on prime time. Sunday Night Football, in front of the hometown crowd that was chanting the play clock in the second half. I wonder if we're going to see them do that from the first quarter this week. Denver's defense isn't bad. They've played okay this year, but the offense has been awful. And the San Francisco defense is really good. San Francisco with Trey Lance out, I don't think it changes things for them a lot. I mean, you take out the QB run things for Jimmy G, but Jimmy G knows the offense. He's been here. He's more stable than Trey Lance, and the defense is just so good. I think the 49ers win this one pretty easily on the road at Mile High against the Broncos. And that brings us to Monday Night Football. Another NFC East divisional matchup. It is the Dallas Cowboys traveling to New York to take on the Giants. Now, the Giants' offense has been bad through 2 games. Daniel Jones doesn't look like the future. Brian Daboll hasn't been able to resurrect his career yet. I think it's safe to say that they will be looking other directions for a quarterback next year and moving forward. But Wink Martindale's defense has gotten them through. Wink Martindale was a great get for them from Baltimore. The defense has been on point through 2 weeks. Now they're facing a bad Cowboys offense. It was bad in week 1, and now Cooper Rush is under center. And yeah, they beat the Bengals. It wasn't a particularly efficient game doing that. It was more about what the Cowboys defense did. Speaking of the Cowboys defense, it should give the Giants fits. Micah Parsons looks like a future Hall of Famer as an edge rusher. And last year, the Cowboys defense lived and died on the turnovers, but this year they've been generally a good squad. Granted, they haven't, they faced the Bucks, who apparently are struggling on offense, and they faced the Bengals, who are definitely struggling on offense, but maybe the Cowboys defense has played a role in that. So I think the Cowboys defense will give the Giants fits, and I think the Giants defense is going to give the Cowboys some fits. Ultimately, I'm going to take the Giants in this game, and I don't feel good about it. Ultimately, this is one of those where I'm picking the Giants because they are the home team. They do have the momentum. They definitely have better coaching than the Cowboys do. And, Daniel Jones is a better quarterback than Cooper Rush. And so they've got an advantage in all of those key areas: quarterback, coach, home field. And so it's hard for me to pick against them, but you can't ignore Micah Parsons and what he might do to this Giants offense. So there it is. There's the picks. We got 7 right in week 1. We've got 8 right last week. We're shooting for 9, or maybe we can get into double digits this week. So again, a shorter show on our previews as I do these solo, but just want to give you guys an idea of what to look out for heading into week 3. So thank you for joining us for episode number 72 of Chalk Talk. I hope you enjoy what you heard on the show. And if you do, be sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. Make sure you're tuned into the Painted Lines on YouTube. I've got some all 22 film reviews up there for the Eagles. Be sure you check those out as well. And so for me, from the Painted Lines, we'll see you guys next time.